Alright, Romeo and Juliet is a tragedy play written by William Shakespeare, aka a dead dude from 1597, which you probably already know that, so I don't gotta tell you the plot and blah 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 famous public domain story adaptations up the ass. As early as 1908, but you may recognize the 1968 version and Romeo plus Juliet, a postmodern adaptation set in the modern day from 1996, even starring Leonardo DiCaprio before he started f***ing 25-year-olds. And keep in mind, in the original play, Romeo is 16 and Juliet is 13, so little did we know Leo is great casting. But one day, some jackass thought the pun of Gnomeo and Juliet was hilarious, so somehow it got made!
Say, look at this! I've been cleaning out my nest, and I found an old book of my poetry.
Christiano, where far out thou, Christiano? And I would be there.
If a shitty movie has a pun title, there's a very good chance they came up with the title before they came up with the plot. Like, why make a retelling of Romeo and Juliet with garden gnomes? Since the story's been done 1,000 times, you gotta do something new to justify its existence. But why garden gnomes? To be funny? Like, who even likes those? But I guess the pun was epic enough to get the project off the ground. I mean, like, Muppet Christmas Carol, I'd argue, is genuinely the best version of A Christmas Carol. So I think that should be the standard for retellings of public domain properties with a unique spin. In common with Muppet Carol, Gnomeo and Juliet also has Michael Caine in it. He was also in Cars 2, meaning that 2011 was not a good year for Michael Caine animated movies. Releasing in 2011, Gnomeo and Juliet made $193.9 million on a $36 million budget, meaning that it was a success only on the basis that it was relatively cheap to make. I swear, I saw part of this movie, maybe not all of it, in like a school cafeteria before Christmas break, once it came out on DVD or something like that. And legitimately, the only thing I remembered is that there's this one gag where, like, a plastic fish keeps sinking to the bottom of the very tiny backyard sinkhole water thing. And it made me wish I was watching Rango, which coincidentally also had a plastic goldfish in it. Yes, both of these movies have a plastic goldfish, and I probably only realized that as a kid because I was bored out of my mind. And I'm an adult, and I'm still bored out of my mind watching this. So since it's a garden gnome retelling, the Montagues and Capulets are divided by their owners in yards in a duplex. Division is also based on the color of their hats. Segregation, oh yeah. Crime, racism. Subject, blue garden gnomes. It takes a Toy Story approach where humanoid character objects are secretly sentient in general, because kids just love gardening decoration humor for 90 minutes. Like, aren't lawnmowers hilarious? The settings are incredibly limited, unlike Toy Story, because it's just dicking off in like the same two backyards, few exceptions. Now, given that this is a PG adaptation, the conclusion of Romeo and Juliet of being super emo and double committing suicide is excluded. I guess the original play's age gap too. Although the original suicide ending is alluded to, but does not affect our protagonist. The movie has an opening narration which just sucks itself off by being like, "Yeah, kids, this is the new cool version. We got garden gnomes." The death of Mercutio at the beginning of Act 3 in the play is somewhat alluded to with the fake-out death of Gnomeo instead, meaning that this character has two fake-out deaths in the span of 30 minutes. But don't worry, after the fake-out death, they have an epic dance party, two of the worst kids movie cliches in a row. But I guess it's not the most unreasonable, because I'd love to boogie down if we magically ended racism. So the plot just basically jumps from familiar story beats in whatever garden gnome race war conflicts they could come up with. Many of the secondary characters have plot equivalents and aren't technically direct adaptations. Like, Juliet's nurse is replaced by a frog who is super quirky and would be played by Awkwafina if this came out now. The animation is fine. Some of the little details like dust and scratches are commendable. It's confident enough for a 30 million animated movie in 2011. Humans are seen throughout the movie movie, and their movements are incredibly awkward. It feels like motion capture was inserted, and you rarely see the human faces in a visible frame, so they might have actually done that. Some of the brief visual gags, like the house address being to be or not to be, are like little details are commendable, but are completely overshadowed by lame gnome jokes for all you gnome lovers.
I'm sorry about your son.
I'm sorry about your daughter.
Wait, what do you mean son and daughter? Do they f***? One of the associated production companies was Rocket Pictures. This is Elton John's film production company, and he was a producer on this movie. Something tells me the director just wanted to hang out with him or something and wanted to dick ride his soundtrack involvement with The Lion King and Road to El Dorado. He was in Bob the Builder, Sky's the Limit. Like, he was clearly only given the role of executive producer for marketability. 2 generic ballads, Hello Hello, featuring Lady Gaga, and Love Build a Garden, were written for the film, as well as a shitty pop cover of Crocodile Rock, which John provides some backing vocals for. This is unfortunate because John made a comeback with his 2010 LP with Leon Russell, The Union. Wait, you don't know what I'm talking about. This film just oddly sucks off the fact that they got Elton John involved. Like, the soundtrack is just an Elton John greatest hits. Even some of the score consists of Elton John melodies, the main theme being an orchestral rendition of Your Song. It's an incredibly unsparing use of licensed music, like they literally play Saturday Night's Alright for Fighting in the daytime. Like, they're just throwing Elton John greatest hits at the wall, great songs not used sparingly. Maybe that's where all the budget went. Elton John is all over this movie in its obnoxious celebrity exploitation that he agreed to. And I've seen Elton John live before, so I know my Elton John. The Tiki Room song from the Enchanted Tiki Room attraction at Walt Disneyland Cali is also in this movie, cause funny, I guess. This is also technically a Disney movie because Touchstone Pictures, which is owned by Disney, was involved. And allegedly, John Lasseter rejected this idea. Like, the original people behind this wanted this to be a Pixar movie. Thankfully, John Lasseter was making good movies like Cars 2. Like, it's barely movie length and has one of the worst gimmicks for an adaptation I've seen. It's the anti-Muppet Christmas Carol, the peak of public domain gimmickal adaptations. The gimmick only conceived for a pun used incredibly unsparingly, like nothing happens, barely a movie, complete slog to get through. It's just a forgettable kids movie that didn't make an exceptional amount of money, but was still viable for the studios involved. But it ain't over because the film actually got a sequel, which might be the most pointless sequel of all time.
Hi everyone, I'm Elton John. Check out my new movie, Sherlock Gnomes, in theaters now.
Sherlock Gnomes in 2018. Once again, they clearly came up with the title before they came up with the plot. The title may imply that it's a spin-off, but it's a direct sequel. Norm of the North 4 and Land Before Time 14 are more justifiable sequels than this. Norm of the North was a hate bandwagon because it was so poorly received, so it got 3 direct-to-video movies to capitalize on the hate watching. The Land Before Time made money, so it makes sense it got 13 sequels and a show. But nobody gives a shit about Gnomeo and Juliet. And 7 years after the original by release date? Like, were they trying to cash in on nostalgia value? I mean, like, that's why Disney sequels have huge gaps. Just look at Inside Out 2, which just released. And this wasn't like a straight-to-Netflix sequel or anything. This was a major motion picture in America. No, a straight-to-Netflix sequel would make too much sense. That's like if The Star or Animal Crackers got a sequel this year, but no, this actually happened. So, Sherlock Gnomes isn't even the main character. It's Gnomeo and Juliet, and Sherlock Gnomes and Dr. Gnome Watson do tag along to the conflict. Like, why not just make a PG animated Sherlock Holmes movie? There aren't a whole lot of them. It's public domain. But I guess that wouldn't be epic because kids just love garden gnomes. It's sort of a Sherlock Holmes retelling. It's just a generic kids adventure with the inclusion of Sherlock Watson, Irene Handler, and Jim Moriarty. Moriarty isn't a gnome. He's like a pie mascot. He's like a porcelain figure that jumps off a shipping van and is sentient. His design is atrocious. It's not much of a detective movie, although unlike the first, they actually don't stick to the same 2 backyards. I guess that's slightly an improvement. Congrats, film, you have locations. The main plot being that now that the Montagues and Capulets are chill now, gnomes randomly start going missing, so they have to get the help of Sherlock Gnomes. Sherlock is barely a detective, like, he looks at clues and, like, deduction, I guess, but, like, a case is barely cracked. This is the least detective-y detective movie I've ever seen. The disappearance of the gnomes is even on the news. I guess they have a news station now. Totally not lazily dumping exposition. There's also an attempt at romantic drama. Juliet wants to garden and Gnomeo doesn't. Married couple conflict. Hooray. Watson has a fake out death 35 minutes in and, like, he's a twist villain. More cliche crap. So he kidnaps all the gnomes because he's angry that Sherlock neglects him. Then Watson's henchmen betray him so he's magically good again. Like, he's a twist villain and redeemed in the span of like 3 minutes. I'm not making this up. Why is he even redeemed? Why is he even a twist villain? But Moriarty isn't the good guy either, so they still have to defeat him and Watson's henchmen. The Elton John exploitation is back immediately. The animation is a slight improvement, probably because technology just got better because it'd been so long. Sherlock and Watson actually have pretty great designs for their concept. That's about as great as a Sherlock gnome could look. There are brief 2D animated segments inside Sherlock's mind, which actually gives good brief 2D animation. Irene has a musical number sung by Mary J. Blige because a pop song for marketability. Her relationship conflict with Sherlock is never resolved. Barely a movie, barely a Sherlock Holmes story, and is easily the most pointless sequel of all time. It bombed as if anybody wanted this, and even making this is legitimately one of the stupidest decisions in the history of film. And since Gnomeo and Juliet is something that the children of 2011 are like, oh yeah, that existed over. And thankfully, this legit attempt to franchise it didn't work because I'd hate to see more public domain characters get their gnome treatment for 1 hour and 17 minutes each.
In your hearts, for my heart is with you. For if I call you out, for I would be there in your heart. And I would personally be calling out, I am here, O fair Juliet. 'Tis no word thy name be heard every waking moment. And the sun is in the east, and Juliet is the